Hello, this is Mark Wildman of Wildman Athletica, and today we are going to discuss a full kneeling press. This is an exercise that we tend to use as a corrective exercise or when we don't have heavier weights. Oftentimes people will use it as a corrective exercise if they're not getting what they need out of their hips from other types of training. By doing this, you will force yourself to change your base of support for your core and your hips, and that changes the way it fires, and then that allows it to get stronger for something like a standing press. Or if you have lighter weights. If you don't have the heavy weights that you need to go up in strength training, then we alter the exercise by changing the base of support so that we can get more out of light weights. Let's walk into this idea in a couple of steps. Standing overhead press with a kettlebell, half kneeling short side press, half kneeling long side press, and then full kneeling press. Let's talk about all four things in the same video so that the idea can be well understood. We're going to start from our rack position with all of our presses. Let's get our kettlebell up to thumb to collarbone height any way we want with good technique. Our handle should be at a 45-degree angle with every press. If our handle is parallel, then we are not going to get what we want out of the press, because changing the angle of our wrist is going to change the angle of our elbow, is going to change the angle of our shoulder, and that will affect the way our core fires. The L of your hand should go into the L of the kettlebell. There should be no gap between the L of your hand and the L of the kettlebell. The handle should be at 45 degrees, and your fingers should be perfectly vertical or pointed towards the sky. If you're using a barbell wrist, you will not like any versions of kettlebell presses. Figure out how to correct your grip, get your elbow in, make your forearm vertical so that you can do the press as a kettlebell press should work. 2 feet pointed straight ahead, elbow towards hip bone, open the shoulder, press all the way up, lock out the tricep at the top. Make your forearm perfectly vertical. Bring the arm down, fold it back in, elbow to hip. In the beginning, we tend to teach open, press, down, closed. As people get better, it starts to look just like a straight vertical press. Next up, we have our half kneeling position. 90 degrees in the lead leg, 90 degrees in the rear leg. Hips drive forward. The point of this is that it starts to change the way our core functions because we've changed the base of support from standing up with 2 feet equal. Short side press means same pressing hand as the lead leg. Get the kettlebell up any way you want. Same thing with the grip. L of the hand to the L of the kettlebell. Elbow starts at your hip. Open, press to lockout, bring the weight down, roll it in. If you need to, square your shoulders, arms straight out to the side. Open, press to lockout, bring it all the way down. Over time, it will start to look more like a straight vertical press. The important part is the lockout and that your fingers are pointed straight towards the sky. Bring the weight down. When you're doing this, don't let your hip sit back. Drive your hip forward, feel a stretch in the front of the long line hip. Change to the other side to work on our long side press. Long side press, knee on the ground, pressing hand. L of the hand to the L of the kettlebell. Open, press all the way up. Squeeze the glute on that long line hip to stretch the front of the hip. Bring the weight down, fold it in, elbow close to hip bone, forearm vertical. Press, bring the weight down. Press, bring the weight down. The important part is to tuck the tailbone underneath and squeeze the glute for the duration of the press to feel the front of the hip open all the way up. The evolution of that idea is 2 hips all the way down, similar to our standing position, but now we're going to have 2 knees all the way down on the ground. If your hips are back, tuck them underneath, drive them forward until you feel a stretch in the front of both hips. Get the kettlebell up any way you want. Recommended is 2 hands underneath, swing the kettlebell up, 45-degree angle on the handle. Focus on the opposite glute from the hand that's pressing. Arm out to the side to square the shoulders. Open, press the lockout. Squeeze the glute the hardest at the top. Bring the weight down, roll it in. Press the lockout, squeeze the glute, bring the weight down, set it down. Open, press the lockout, bring the weight all the way down. Transition to the other side. Bring your hand to the other hand, Set it down with good technique until both arms are perfectly straight. Change hands. Other hand becomes dominant. Loop underneath. Get the weight up. L of the hand to the L of the kettlebell. Squeeze the glute. Don't let your tailbone stick back. Drive your hips forward. Focus on the opposite glute squeeze. Open. Vertical press. Bring the weight down. Rest back at collarbone height. Forearm vertical. Elbow close to hip. Arm out to the side to squeeze the shoulders. Press. Squeeze the glutes as hard as possible with the weight overhead. Bring the weight down. Open. Press. Squeeze the glutes as hard as you can. Bring the weight down. Elbow close to hip. Set it down. Straight arms. Good technique. You can always use an exercise like this if you have light weights. Oftentimes this can be used as something like a warm-up. If you're going to be doing a standing heavy press, then you could throw these exercises in, half kneeling short line, half kneeling long line, full kneeling exercise, in order to activate your core in different ways at the beginning of your training session. More stimulus and the change in the base of support will help you work on pressing heavier weights over time. Or you can just use these as part of your dedicated press training if you do not have access to heavier weights, or if you experience back pain when pressing heavy weights. Changing the base of support, focusing on the glute squeeze will change the way your core fires, and that will help you over time become better at pressing. You could throw this in as just a rep count, 3 sets of 3 on each side, or if you have very light weights, do it as a time under tension, say 30 seconds on each side. Focus on the glute squeeze on every single rep.